Good morning. We are gathered here today to discuss and interact on a topic of great importance for the planet, for Asia, and of course, India and Japan. And our guests today have seen it all from close quarters. How better could we have celebrated or participated in the Japan month, which is being held? The global economy is undergoing a significant shift today as nations prioritize economic resilience, supply chain security, and technological leadership, driven by rising geoeconomic tensions and disruptions caused by the pandemic environment. Countries have accelerated efforts to diversify trade routes, to de-risk supply chains, and bolster critical industries like semiconductors, green technologies, and green manufacturing. Furthermore, the emphasis on climate mitigation and resilience is driving the push for sustainable growth, particularly through climate-resilient infrastructure. This has resulted in a change in geopolitical focus to emphasize strategic partnerships and investment in innovation to secure long-term growth. India and Japan, two prominent Asian powers and close partners, are adapting to navigate through this shift. Both nations are committed to deepening cooperation in areas such as trade, infrastructure, and technology. India seeks to enhance connectivity and diversify its trade partners while also becoming a manufacturing hub. Japan, on the other hand, remains a global leader in technological innovation and manufacturing. Beyond bilateral partnerships, both are also engaged in strategic partnerships to supply public goods, including through the Quadrilateral Partnership as well as the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. This resonates with their shared vision for inclusive development, free trade, and investment in quality infrastructure across the Indo-Pacific. We are therefore privileged to have among us Governor Hayashi Nobumitsu and Ambassador Bhagwati to talk about the emerging geoeconomic imperatives. Mr. Hayashi Nobumitsu is Governor of Japan Bank for International Cooperation, or JBIC. He started his professional career at the Ministry of Finance, Government of Japan, and upon graduating from the University of Tokyo in 1980. Since then, he has held various senior positions at the ministry and has been in charge of economic policy, government finance, and international finance, including as the Director General of the Finance Bureau and the President of the Policy Research Initiative. He was appointed the Commissioner of National Tax Agency in 2014. He has since held senior positions at JBIC and was appointed Governor in 2022. Welcome, Governor.
Thank you.
Ambassador Jaimini Bhagwati is a former Indian Foreign Service officer and a financial sector and derivatives specialist. He was appointed India's High Commissioner to the United Kingdom, and prior to that, he has been India's ambassador to the European Union, Belgium, and Luxembourg. Earlier, he has held various senior positions at the Ministry of External Affairs and the Ministry of Finance, and also in the Department of Atomic Energy. He was employed for 11 years as the World Bank Treasury in Washington, D.C. in two phases between 1991 and 2005. And his responsibilities included issuance of World Bank bonds and pricing of associated derivatives transactions. After retiring from the government, he has been the Reserve Bank Chair Professor at ICRIER, and currently he is a Distinguished Fellow at CSEP. Welcome, Ambassador. So may I now request Governor to address us with his
Here or
anywhere, that's fine. You can be. It's your choice.
okay. Good morning, distinguished guests and ladies and gentlemen, or friends and partners. I'm very excited to be here with you. I was here last August and very happy to be back. But for those of you who are unfortunately doesn't know JBIC very well, let me introduce what we are and what we do. We are an official financial institution that support Japanese business all around the globe, including, of course, in India. You may know JICA, our official institution that does ODA, grants and concessional loans, whereas we do commercial transactions. Our counterpart in India is Exim Bank of India, Export-Import Bank. We were used to called as Japanese Exim Bank, but we do more and more investment financing, either back financing investment by Japanese companies, or we invest ourselves. So we rather are proud to be called Japan Bank for International Cooperation, supporting Japanese companies. But we don't just support Japanese companies. We want to contribute to the industrial development of the host countries, as well as contributing to the global challenges. So that's what we do and why we are called international cooperation. And you may know that Japan and India have enjoyed over the last 10 years special strategic and global partnership. It's a partnership with 3 adjectives, just one. It is strategic in this geopolitical rivalry and geoeconomic sanctions and countermeasures. And it has a global reach, not just bilateral, but over the whole Indo-Pacific region. And it is surely a special relationship between the 2 peace-loving, open democracies. So by doing project by project, we want to contribute to strengthening these bilateral relationships and contribute to the peace and prosperity of Indo-Pacific region. Now, there are several areas that we are very keen on in supporting Japanese companies. We have had a survey over 30 years asking Japanese manufacturing industry, which is the country to invest. And for many years, India has been the #1 destination for long-term perspective over 10 years. But in a short-term perspective, when we ask them, where do you want to invest in 3 years coming? They always said China, #1. So India has always been the investment destination for the future, but for today, they have invested in China. But for the past 2 years, India surpassed China as the short-term destination as well, partly because China became unpopular because of geopolitical struggle, but also because India is getting more and more popular. We very much feel as through our discussion and communication with Japanese executives that they have more interest in India because they can't just ignore the Indian market because of population, because of the growing, and because of its future potential. So we are very much thrilled to support those investments in India, especially in terms of manufacturing. Maruti Suzuki is a very popular auto company, even much more popular in India than in Japan or in other Asian countries. So during COVID-19 years, we supported the supply chains of Maruti Suzuki, their suppliers and dealers and auto financiers. Our mission is to support Japanese companies, but in the case of Maruti Suzuki, we supported local Indian companies who consist a very important supply chain for Maruti Suzuki. We also supported Nippon Steel along with ArcelorMittal Investments and the M&A of SR Steel Company, because India doesn't have US Workers Union or Donald Trump to block the deal. And if Donald Trump saw how much investment Nippon Steel is making in the former SR Steel plant, he should be welcoming Nippon Steel's investment in US Steel. And for Japanese company, like Nippon Steel, India is the growing market, and they can't hope to construct big furnaces in Japan anymore because of the lessening demand and also because of the climate change requirements. So India is the market for the expansion of Nippon Steel, and we are very proud to finance those things. And the growing interest is in semiconductors. The Indian government is very keen to set up supply chain of semiconductors in India. And you may know that many Japanese companies are very much active in some parts or some devices for manufacturing semiconductors. We are ready to support those industries so that we can share the supply chain with India, with Korea, and US, so that we can continue to have semiconductor supply chains within our friendly countries. But in this sphere, you're aware that China is very dominant player in some of the precious metals, and they are very keen in trying to find how effective they can retaliate trade restrictions by US or by Japan and the Netherlands. So this is a very challenging area. And on top of supporting manufacturing investment, we are supporting a stronger industrial infrastructure. We have been as a sponsor of National Industrial Corridor Company along with the Indian government to set up more industrial corridors and to invite more Japanese companies. We have also a joint investor in the India-Japan Fund together with National Investment and Infrastructure Fund of India, which is the national fund that invests in startups. We want to, together with the Indian government, to be investing more and more in Indian startups in the area of environment, and also want to invest India-Japan consortium to bring more and more Japanese investment in India. But still, the logistics is a very fragile and vulnerable part of the Indian supply chain. I drove yesterday to Faridabad, was that?
Faridabad.
Yeah, it's just 40 kilometers, but took 1 hour to and from that place. The reason I went there was that joint venture by Japanese Konoike and Joshi Group are setting up inland depot, and we are financing the upgrading of their cargo trains and to contribute to the better logistic in India. You may know that because of COVID-19 or Canal and Panama Canal problems, the manufacturers moving from just-in-time operation to just-in-case operation. But you can't hope to be just-in-time in India from the beginning. So in order to upgrade and streamline your logistic, we want to continue to support the investment in logistics as well. Data center is another area which is increasingly important in this AI universe. So we are supporting Japanese telecommunication entity to be investing in data centers as well, which means that you need more energy, clean energy. And the energy is another area that we very much want to support Indian investment. India doesn't want to be carbon neutral until 2070, but at least want to make India energy independent at 2047, and building 500 gigawatts of renewable energy toward 2030 is a very ambitious challenge. So we've been supporting through your government agencies to invest in renewables. But just investing in renewable is not enough to be decarbonizing society. And well, politicians would like to say that we're building certain gigawatts, we have built certain gigawatts, but strengthening the power grid or investing more in saving energy are essential parts of decarbonizing the society. And Japanese companies are very good and have experience like Panasonic or Hitachi in these areas. So we are supporting the financing of these projects as well. And in the future, hydrogen and ammonia would be playing a key important role in the energy sphere. But at this time, the cost is very high and there is no long-term off-taker in hydrogen and ammonia. But although there are over 1,000 prospective projects all over the world on hydrogen and ammonia, no project has been really commercialized. But as JBIC, as a pioneer in financing energy, we have provided financing to a project pursued mainly by UAE's ADNOC and the Japanese Mitsui and Korean company participated in the project at the very first commercial manufacturing and possibly transport and usage in Asia of ammonia. So while we are trying to support conventional manufacturing and conventional energy and conventional logistics, we are very keen to support the emerging technology, emerging business, and start investing in startup as well. So all in all, these are what we do. We support Japanese companies' activities, but by doing that, we very much align with the needs of the Indian economy and society, and also aligning with Indians' policy initiatives. And by doing that, we want to contribute not just more Japanese business here, but more thriving Indian economy, and also strengthening India-Japan relationship. And I would very much like to hear from you advices and suggestions where we can do, because while more and more Japanese companies would like to be here, with many challenges in India's society, there are a lot of red tapes. Although the legal system, judicial system are maybe open and transparent, the actual implementation of those laws and regulations are very much awkward or import restriction and time consuming. And then there is a challenge of infrastructure, as I explained. And then there are cultural differences between our two countries, which sometimes Japanese business persons find very much difficult. They might find some cities where they can't enjoy beer or alcohol, or they can't enjoy beef or pork. And as man does not live on chicken alone, it's a challenge for Japanese business persons. So we want continue to work with you together so that there will be, you can welcome more and more Japanese investment. Thank you very much and for your attention, and look forward to your comments and questions. Thank you.
Yeah. I will also speak from there. It's just easier that you're standing up. I don't need that. I've jotted down a few points, but before I get on to the points I've jotted down, let me say a very good morning to Mr. Hayashi Nobumitsu. I don't know whether I pronounced it correctly, but I must add son at the end. Governor of JBIC, his colleagues, and my colleagues in CSEP and other visitors who may be here today. And of course, Lavish, who is the head of CSEP right now. First of all, my comments would be much broader. He has a specific mandate. He's the governor of JBIC, and he spoke about what JBIC does around the world, and particularly in Asia, in Indonesia, and so on. And I'm sure we can look it up on JBIC's website too. But I will say that, first of all, we are looking with great interest who will be the next Prime Minister of Japan. We have had very good relations with Japan, and I think it will be decided in the next 2 weeks or so, in a fortnight or so. I think the decision will be taken in terms of the voting within LDP. I guess, when I look at emerging geo-economic imperatives, one could speak about anything under this broad. One of the words used is emerging. So, it depends on whose perspective it is, what is emerging and what is not. Geo-economic imperative. Imperative means something which is very imperative, very urgent, something you have to do. So one imperative that we have, and I heard him very clearly when he said that man does not live on chicken alone, but he or she can also get fish here. Pork and beef are, you know how it is. We all know how it is, because sometimes some people in India want to impose their dietary habits and their dietary restrictions on others. But we will get there. We will get there. Unfortunately, you have been patient so long, a little more patience about dietary habits. I think you mentioned about cooperation between Indian entities and how long it takes to get to Faridabad, 1 hour. Sometimes it can take 2 hours if it's rained a lot. So high tech. So I agree with you. India operates at various levels. You suddenly meet someone in Bangalore or Hyderabad who is constantly in touch with somebody in the US or Europe, and they are at the cutting edge of writing software. It's not only body shopping any longer, even in Gurgaon. So I think JBIC could look, particularly with regard to semiconductors. That's the buzzword, semiconductors. You'll use semiconductors and life will become okay. Now, I think India has many other challenges, but semiconductors is one area where India, for its own requirements, because you can just think of our population. If JBIC could think of how it can be done, I have no idea. I know that every now and then I see the minister concerned. I think his name is Vaishno. He's the cabinet minister concerned, and we hear of this or that initiative. But I would think that at a micro, at the level of companies, at the level of district administration, at the level of state administration, at the level of the national administration, that is the government headed by Prime Minister Modi, you will find unstinted support. And you might have to actually guide the relevant authorities as to how to give you that support so that some of that manufacturing is done here. Correct me if I'm wrong, it seems that you need very pure water in these semiconductor plants for some reason. And water is not in abundant supply, except this monsoon where we have had abundant water. But it seems it has to be very, very pure. So maybe you help promote a venture where people here get to understand why that water has to be so pure. It seems it's some unbelievable level of purity that is required in terms of the water. I don't even know what the water is used for. It can't be used for washing the chips or the semiconductors, but somewhere in the production process, you need water. Water is scarce. People don't have water to bathe. But I don't know how this will be done, but you may like to consider this. Now to come to more broader issues. We are at a stage where interest rates, that is the cost of money domestically. This is an area which I'm familiar with, so I normally tend to talk about areas that I'm familiar with. Interest rates affects everybody. Why am I talking about interest rates? Because the Reserve Bank of India has kept our overnight rate at 6.5%. It's astronomically high, I think. Yes, we have concerns about inflation. By the way, that is the rate at which RBI lends to borrowers, mainly banks. And the rate at which it accepts money, the interest rate it will give you is 3.5%. There's a 300 basis point spread nowhere in the world. So we need more efficiencies there in terms of our financial sector. You can't have such huge spreads. And at the last meeting of the MPC, as we call it, the Monetary Policy Committee, it was decided not to change rates. I'm hoping that at the next meeting, we will reduce rates. And the reason I talk about interest rates is because today is 18th of September. The Federal Reserve, that's the US central bank, is likely to cut interest rates by 25 basis points. What it does to the international economy, as a banker, JBIC is a financial institution. Earlier, the Japanese Exim Bank, I'm sure you watch interest rates very carefully, because whatever interest rate you charge has some linkages to interest rates around the world. So let's see, 25 basis points, I think the markets have already absorbed, whether it is equity markets or bond markets. I think Mr. Jerome Powell, I think that's his name, the governor of the Federal Reserve, he will really surprise the markets if he cuts by 50 basis points. And that's happening today. They are behind us. I mean, not in their economy or otherwise, only in terms of the time. I think New York is 9.5 hours and maybe California is 12.5 hours behind us in terms of the hour of the day. So somewhere around midnight or later today, we'll hear of what the new interest rate is. And the European Central Bank also cut rates. I'll have to look at my notes over here to how much they cut their rates, but can we just go, do you have my bullet points here? Can you just go ahead? I think whatever rate, they cut rates by, what is it? Yes, they cut rates by 25 basis points on September 12. Today is September 18, not even a week since ECB cut rates. All this is topical. Maybe you people follow interest rates, or maybe you don't. I follow global interest rates very closely, because it is one of the most important factors that go into investment decisions around the world. That's the, if we can go to the next bullet point. Okay. Now, that's what the EU has done. And Europe, I'm now looking at, I'll not talk too much about the US economy, because of the obvious reason that, they are going in for presidential elections very soon. And I think the views are so different that we don't quite know where it's all going to end. But Europe, you might have heard of a man called Mario Draghi. He was the head of ECB, the European Central Bank. Subsequently, given the political turmoil in Italy, he became the Prime Minister of Italy, because they couldn't find any other candidate they could have a consensus on. For the EU, he has written a report. I would strongly recommend people to have a look at it if you want to know what are the concerns of somebody as knowledgeable as Mario Draghi about Europe. Europe as a whole, if you look at the European Union, don't disregard it, because it's about 460 million people. It's not that small a number. I'm taking the UK obviously out of it, because they have indulged themselves with this silly thing of Brexit, and they are suffering for it. And in fact, if they don't become more productive, according to a report in the Financial Times, the size of the UK economy in 2050 may be the same as it is today. So that's how difficult things can become if you engage in this political drama of leaving Europe. It's a much larger market. They would have been much better off if they had been there, and the world would have been much better off. You see, unlike some other people, I feel that if everybody does well, rising tide raises all boats. So it's good for India if the global economy does well. It's good for India if large chunks of the world, Japan does well. I will hesitate to say exactly the same for China, but the rest of the world and so on. We're not going to get political here. As we know, the Bank of Japan raised its key interest rate. Contrary to what other central banks are doing, it raised its key interest rate, which was roughly between 0 to 0.1%. I'm sure people would like to take housing loans in Japan, but then you have to repay in yen, which may appreciate. So you're taking currency risk. So you have to be careful. So yes, it raised its key interest rate from about 0.1% to 0.25%. Now, You might wonder, the whole world is reducing rates. Why is Japan? Well, Japan has followed easy money for a long time, since 2008. Am I correct, Governor? Somewhere around that time, the great financial meltdown, which I call, and so does one good friend of mine who's in CSEP, call it the North Atlantic financial sector meltdown. By North Atlantic, I mean the USA and Europe. It didn't affect us in India because we were not paying our executives. Gradually, we are doing so, our financial sector executives, those astronomical salaries with huge bonuses, which give you the incentive to take huge risks with somebody else's money, which means depositors' money. So that's what happened to US and Europe. And Japan also suffered as being part of the G7. And then for a long time, growth was very low and interest rates were, I think in real terms, were negative. And as I just mentioned, it has raised its key benchmark rate to 0.25%. By contrast, the Asian giant called China has I can't read the stuff on the Chinese central bank's website because it's all in Chinese. It's literally Chinese. Many things are Chinese for me because I don't understand. But here, the website is in Chinese. But I could figure out from some other databases that it has raised its 5-year loan prime rate to 3.85% and the 1-year rate to 3.35%. What does it mean? You look at their rates as compared to our repo rate. Now, for those who are not familiar with the repo rate, it's the overnight lending rate by the central bank to banks, to commercial deposit-taking banks. That's the rate. That's what is the repo rate. And that's 6.5% overnight. And the 5-year loan rate in China, the benchmark rate, there will be a spread depending upon the creditworthiness of the borrower, 3.85%. So the cost of money in India is way more than what it is in Europe and in China and, of course, in Japan. Japan is a sui generis. We can't compare with Japan. So does it mean that, total factor productivity in India is very high? We just heard that it takes 1 hour to get to Faridabad. I don't think if you were to look at any global database which tracks India, that our TFP, total factor productivity, is so high that our higher interest rates do not mean that our exchange rate has to depreciate. I personally feel, and please quote me freely, normally speakers say, no, don't quote me. No, please quote me freely. The exchange rate should be, and that it should be of interest to JBIC, somewhere around 104, 105 rupees to the dollar. Our tourists and parents of children who are studying in the US will object, but that what I think is a fair rate, 104 to 105 rupees to the dollar. And our exporters will cheer me, and the importers will weep. The importers of luxury automobiles, which they pay 150% duty on, or some such thing, I don't know. It's absurd. We talk about competitiveness. You referred to Maruti, and my understanding, please correct me if I'm wrong, anybody in the room, that for a finished automobile, I don't know about automobile parts, if you import a brand new automobile, our automobile manufacturers, including Maruti, probably lobby the Indian government to retain those absurdly high prices. We will not allow second-hand cars to come into India, because as you know, second-hand cars in developed countries slip to 25% of the value. I'm sure Tino knows about Germany and Portugal and so on. So that the prices really drop for a second-hand car, but we won't allow, because we don't want competition for our domestic manufacturers. What else do I want to say? I'm looking at the time because we want to leave time for questions. NTPC, I believe, has secured please correct me again, $200 million loan from JBIC. And I hope that more of not just the large public sector undertakings, but others also interact. And this is more to your colleagues who may be based in Delhi. I'm sure they're doing it, interact more. You really have to look for those entities. Sometimes young entrepreneurs might be much better of course, they'll need to have 5-10 years of experience before you lend to them. I would encourage JBIC. This is my Indian coming out that, would like you to look for those future, who should I say, winners in terms of not just the existing winners, and hopefully that collaboration between JBIC and future winners in India proves mutually beneficial. Why do I talk about Henry David Thoreau in some of my bullet points somewhere? I spent some years for my sins in Boston doing a PhD in finance. And as it happens, Lavish also visited at roughly that time. And I used to go to a pond, lake, I think I should call it, known as the Walden Lake. And a very famous American author of poems and such like is a man called Henry David Thoreau, and he wrote a book called Walden because he lived there next to that lake. You might be wondering, sudden jump from interest rates to somewhere he says that, most men lead lives of quiet desperation. I think he's a creature of his times, mid-19th century. If he had written it today, he would have said most women lead lives of quiet desperation. I think I'm 100% sure that most men and women in India, over 50%, perhaps, I seem to be developing a cold. I have to be careful. Lead lives of quiet desperation. So, and you saw this recently in the farmers' agitation in India, the ongoing agitation, hopefully it will die down, of doctors in Bengal. And just across the border, the students brought a government down. Why? Because there's not enough ultimately, it's a question of economic development. It's a question of fair salaries. It's a question of reasonable standards of living. If you are oppressed, suppressed, and depressed by these factors, then you tend to join others who are agitating about something. It's not something that JBIC can do because it's not your mandate. But to the extent that you interact with us economically, you reduce the number of people leading lives of quiet desperation. Geoeconomics in the topic cannot be divorced from geopolitics. And we know that India and Japan are members of the Quad. I believe just 3 days from today, I don't know whether you followed the media about the preparations, the next Quad summit will happen in Delaware. The only thing I remember about Delaware is that it's a tax haven, just like some other tax havens. I'll not name the others. The Delaware is where the 4 heads of government will meet of Quad, including obviously President Biden, who by this time is somewhat of a lame president. But despite that, Quad has a certain objective. We all know the objectives. We know why these 4 countries, we know what their Quad for me is, it has a whole series of objectives. But the principal objective is strategic. And you know what that strategy is about. We don't need to name that country. It has 5 letters on it, starting with C and ending with A. So he's going to attend that. But then that's on 21. Then we have our Indian Prime Minister attending the BRICS summit in Kazan. You might wonder, where the hell is Kazan? Kazan is about 800 kilometers to the east of Moscow. I had to look it up, frankly. I didn't know where Kazan was, even though I've been to the USSR in the USSR times, many times. I've been to Russia many times. I was responsible for my sins, among other countries, Russia and Central Asia at one stage in the Indian Foreign Office. So he'll be attending that. And who are the members of BRICS? It started off with just 4 countries: Brazil, Russia, India, China. Then South Africa was brought in by India. I'm not in government, I can speak frankly now, but to dilute somewhat China. Now then the Chinese and the Russian felt we must dilute India here. So another 4 countries have been added, and they are what? Egypt, Ethiopia, UAE, and Iran. Iran, of course, has just said a few things which India is not comfortable about discrimination against religious minorities. The supreme leader has said that. But we continue to have civilizational ties with Iran and will continue to be friends with them. But BRICS, for me, I was responsible for BRIC in the Indian Foreign Office, which is called the Ministry of External Affairs. So I attended various summits here and there, all at government expense. And we discussed endlessly various things. Some things have happened. Many things have not happened. There's a BRICS Bank, as you know, in Shanghai. The Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank is in Beijing. So you can understand which is more commercially inclined and which is more. So you must interact with JBIC to find out how much they work with both AIIB and with the BRICS Bank in Shanghai, headquartered in Shanghai. The first head was Mr. Kamath of ICICI fame. The reason why I bring these two summits to your attention, you must be reading about them, because if you are going to talk about geo-economic imperatives, as far as India is concerned, these formations are also important. BRICS less so because it has been diluted. I feel with these many different kind of people, it's going to be difficult to move forward. You can have lots of joint statements, but that doesn't mean much. Tino follows all joint statements very closely. Tino, I would submit that read the first paragraph, last paragraph. Don't read the in between. You're wasting your time. Because people like me are drafting these various things, various places, and they're also doing quite a bit of cut and paste, and then changing the grammar so that it looks as if it's a new joint statement. You know, with the initiative to set up the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework was taken by the US in 2022. Again, another framework where China is, I mean, Indo-Pacific. Is China a Pacific nation? The only ocean against which it has a coastline is the Pacific. We have two. We have the Indian Ocean / Pacific, because Indian Ocean becomes Pacific Ocean as you keep going towards the east. And we have the Arabian Sea. The Chinese have only one, but they are not included. China has made its life difficult for itself with certain kinds of attitudes towards its Asian neighbors and fellow travelers through history. We all know, I'm sure JBIC knows, I don't know how often you go to Laos, but Laos unfortunately has politically been captured by China, and Cambodia less so. It'll be interesting to know from your website if you have any lending in Laos or in Cambodia. The Asia-Africa Growth Corridor, and I'll stop there. I don't know, it was set up by India and Japan. Maybe the objective is to compete with China in Africa, because it's difficult to compete with China on your own. Even for mighty Japan and mighty JBIC, it's difficult to compete with China. And the fact that they can provide sub-market rate loans and perhaps outright grants. And I feel it's a good initiative. I don't know how far it will go. You may like to ask the JBIC governor. I personally do not know how much work has been done at the government level or at a sub-government level. With those words, because we are already now at 9:45, we should have at least 15 minutes of Q&A. I'll stop and thank you everyone for listening so patiently to me. Thank you.
We have a Q&A session now. May I request you, Ambassador, to moderate the...
Sure. Anybody, any questions? Please raise your hand and somebody will bring a mic to you. Or perhaps you're already overwhelmed and now need a second cup of coffee. Can you give the mic to the gentleman there?
My question is to the governor. I mean, as a consumer of durables, cars, etc., we see that there is a distinct difference in the aggressiveness with which Japanese companies come to India versus the South Koreans. And I'm using the usual consumer durables and cars as an example. So I was just wondering, I mean, do you see that difference in approach? Is it to do with India specifically, or is that to do with how Japanese companies invest in general across the world? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. It's a very interesting question. Well, the Japanese manufacturers were omnipotent in the past. They sold electric appliances, cars, and computers, and everything. But now they are moving more and more to B2B business, except in the case of automobiles. So Maruti Suzuki and Toyota are all over the world selling autos to consumers. But while other companies like Hitachi, Toshiba, Panasonic, those or NEC, those are working more and more behind the scenes in B2Cs, B2Bs, or in parts or manufacturing devices. So they continue to be very, very aggressive, and we finance those investments. But you may not find those in consumer stores, except in the case of Uniqlo, who is very much popular among you consumers here as well. Thank you very much.
Hi, my question is to Hayashi-san. I would like to talk about or know about automobile sector. What we see is that while India in its export basket, automobile sector is one of the topmost exported items, but at the same time, we do not constitute a large share in global exports. So what's the problem, that we do not have that scale? We have a huge domestic market, but at the same time, we are catering to domestic market, but not exporting. So why are we not able to scale up? What are the impediments? Like you talked about some logistics and other things, technology. What is it that pulls us back from scaling up? That's the question mark that I have, given that India is a large country with labor pool, labor cost advantage. What's the problem in scaling up?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, but I think you need some more time for India's auto sector to be expanding, not just for the domestic market, but for export market. At this time, Japanese companies and suppliers continue to be investing in India, but there are still a lot of challenges for those manufacturing companies in terms of logistic and in terms of quality of skilled labor. So they are hardly trying to satisfy the domestic needs, but they should be bringing more and more investment by Japanese suppliers of those vehicles. But it is still challenging. As more investment is made in India, and India market moves to a higher quality and better quality cars, you may have a chance to be exporting from India. But now satisfying domestic market is still a challenge for those Japanese as well as Korean or American car makers.
Yeah, Hayashi-san, wonderful to hear you, always enlightening. And I remember two things that we discussed last year when you had been to CSEP, but they did not come up so much this year. And I wonder your comments about those. One is about technology, one is about politics. Technology, that India's been signing a variety of technology-based partnerships, led mostly by the national security establishment with private sector buy-in. I said with the US, UK in the making, with France. But Japan, somehow that hasn't developed yet so much, that Japan-India technological partnership between both countries. But I wonder, as governments maybe are fleshing this out, what would be your sense of what would be of interest for Japanese companies to have technology-based partnerships in AI, for example, with India? Or does it even weigh at all? Is that of interest? Or do you want to stick to the basics of manufacturing? Second, about politics. We discussed last year we had Sri Lanka in a tough situation where your companies have invested massively. This year we have Bangladesh, which is in disruption, where again, most of your companies had gone to and still are investing in the Matabari port and a variety of multimodal infrastructure projects that we follow closely here at CSEP. But I wonder, how are your companies dealing with political turbulence in Southeast Asia? Look at the Thai cabinet being reshaped every couple of years, etc., across Southeast Asia. So if you could tell us how companies are sensitive or not to those political changes across these regions.
Well, yes, on the politics, it's always a challenge for business people because of the political changes. But fortunately, in the case of Thai or Malaysia, despite all the political difficulties, their economies are fine and their companies are fine. So the Japanese companies have invested and keep and stay in those countries, so without any problem. While there may be a big political change in US as well, but the US economy continues to be thriving. So one of our largest portfolio is in US as well. But quite importantly, in Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, or in Myanmar, where Japanese government has worked a lot in order through ODA and also through debt cancellation, it is a very unfortunate. But as in the case of JBIC, we haven't financed too many projects in these countries. They were the financial assistance to these countries have been mainly through ODA, grants and concessional loans. So we don't have that much problem. But thinking of the potential of these countries and thinking of the future development and investment opportunities, we are very, very seriously looking at the situation. And like in the case of Sri Lanka, Japan and India should cooperate in order to find a solution. And that's what we very much hope to find in Bangladesh or in Myanmar case as well. Well, as to the technology per se, we are not quite a player because the development of new technology are often done by subsidies and researchers. But in the case of newer technology, when they are being commercialized, we do finance those projects. And we are very keen to do that with counterparts in India or in the US or in Korea. I talked about our example of blue ammonia with UAE. And so we are doing a first game-changing geothermal project in Germany as well. So what I hope to do is that not just in research level, but in commercializing those new technology, new business models, we would very much like to finance the emerging those technologies together with the India company. Thank you.
Hi, at the back here. Sorry. So just wanted to also understand from JBIC's perspective of supporting joint ventures out of or overseas from Japan, are there other perspectives beyond economic outcomes that are looked at, such as if it benefits strategic development of relationships with Japan versus does it help the other countries' economy as well because of past relationships? What are other criteria that JBIC looks into when it's supporting a joint venture?
Well, our mission is to support Japanese companies. So in any project we support, there has to be some Japanese element, Japanese sponsorship, Japanese off-taking, or Japanese technology being used. That's the one. But as an official institution, we want to better the relationship of the host country and Japan. So by supporting those investments, we would like to contribute to the better welfare, better living standard, better industrial development of the host country. And also, we're thinking strategically in terms of what project we do. He talked about our engagement in ASEAN. Our exposure is very big, maybe after US in Indonesia, in Vietnam. These are important countries strategically in our geopolitical rivalry between China and US and Japan. So we are very keen to do more and more business in these countries or the Philippines. Well, unfortunately, we have very little exposure in Laos or Cambodia. In Laos, we did the hydrogen project, but well, it's important that we to continue trust among ASEAN countries in Japan. There's an independent research institute that has annually done a survey of ASEAN leaders, which country they trust. And Japan has always been the most trusted partner for ASEAN countries, which is quite a contrast to US, who has a big military presence, or China, which has a big economic presence. So we cannot counter Chinese investment or Chinese trade volume, but in quality assistance or in aligning with the US, Korea, and India, we want to continue to be a trusted partner in ASEAN countries. So these are things that we are thinking over when we support Japanese companies. Thank you.
I remember in 1992 when I went to Japan first time, the exchange rate USD to Japanese yen was about 125 in that range. Within a few years, it had come down to something like 80. Today, it's almost 145. How does JBIC sort of calibrate its investments and other strategies with respect to such massive changes in the
Well, actually, our balance sheet on both sides of the balance sheet is in US dollars, dominantly US dollars. So we are not really influenced by the US dollar yen exchange rate, although because of the cheaper yen, our balance sheet or our PL are exploding these days. But we do, while we are not really affected day to day, our customers are, because of the fluctuation of US dollar yen exchange rates, and also because of the higher interest rates, higher cost of everything, as he explained. So we keep on watching the situation and try to find the best solution for our customers. It should be a floating rate or fixed rate. It should be in euro or yen. So we'll try to find a best financial solution according to the type of project, type of investment our customers are doing.
One last question, because we are coming up to 10 o'clock. You've been putting up your hand, but very tentatively. You should put it up like this and start waving.
Hayashi-san, I wanted to build on a point that Professor Bhagwati had made on Africa.
Mhm.
I was at a conference earlier this year when there were officials at JBIC and JICA
Yes.
who had very ambitiously put forth the strategy for Japan's engagement in Africa, and especially about JBIC stepping up its support for countries in the region.
Mhm.
Could you throw some light on how JBIC sees
Yeah. Thank you very much. Japan has been constantly strengthening our interaction with the African countries. And every 3 years, we have a TICA meeting where we invite African leaders, maybe 50 or 60 leaders. And I once was executive assistant to our prime minister in 2009. And in 4 days, he met 40 presidents of Africa. So it was a very toughening case. So we continue to support African countries through our ODA and also through our private investment. We have done big wind power project or small off-grid power project as well. We continue to do that. But unfortunately, not all Japanese companies are willing to do business in Africa. So we want to tie up with the Indian companies or Turkish companies who better know the African situation much better than we do. So that's one of the challenging things that we want to tackle.
I'd said absolutely last question, but the gentleman there is raising his hand. So maybe this has to be the last question, please.
So I have two quick questions. One is, there was a point in time when the Japanese Sogo Shoshas or the Zaibatsus had a powerful influence on Japanese economy. Has that got diluted a little bit, or it continues to be as strong as ever? And if it is strong or diluted, what is your relationship with these leading Sogo Shoshas as such? And the second is, about 10 years back, there was this bad experience of Daiichi taking over Ranbaxy. Did that influence the financial and the other business community in Japan as a bad experience kind of thing? And does that, the hang of it, does it still remain?
Well, I don't think it still affects. There are successes and failures, as happens in any business. And now I think there's a constant interest in this market. And as to the Sogo Shosha, yeah, they are striving, and they are a big business, especially in global business. So we do many energy project, mining project, oil and gas project with those Sogo Shoshas, and they continue to be a very strong partner for us. Yeah, one last thing I want to say is that, well, yes, man doesn't live on chicken alone. I would like to enjoy fish, but India needs established cold chain, which is lacking here. We support financing of cold chains in Southeast Asia so that I can enjoy raw fish in Bangkok. And I hope to see that in India as well.
I completely agree with you. I have absolutely no dietary restrictions. Some Indians do, so maybe we will get there, that in some places you can get everything. I'm sorry, because it's 10 o'clock, and I would like to begin my closing remarks by saying thank you very much, Hayashi-san, and your colleagues from JBIC for having come here today, spent so much of your time here. I know your time is precious. You must be having many meetings, particularly given the travel time from one point to another. But I would also like to thank Lavish and his colleagues at CSEP for setting this up. And nothing much more to say, that if you are not from JBIC and not from CSEP, then I thank you too for coming so early at 9 o'clock for this session, which is inordinately early for me because this is my time to read. But I decided, since I was asked to come early, and actually I landed up even earlier than I imagined because there's not much traffic. So once again, thank you to everyone, and thank you particularly Hayashi-san for coming again, and we hope that you will keep coming back and enlightening us about the activities of JBIC, particularly the ones where you are looking at newer technologies.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much.